True me.
So, good evening, everybody. Please sit comfortably, and I'm sorry to burden you with that.
That's okay.
You can find a way to prop it or something. We are set to work through the Diamond Sutra together, and today it's time to chat about the second paragraph or so. Our text says the following. Actually, the setup, if you remember, the first paragraph, we encountered the Buddha, and he was in a garden retreat at the Jeta Grove, and he went with his monastics, his bhikkhus, and they went and begged for the midday meal in the city, and then they came back and took the meal, and then he put away the robes in the bowl and washed his feet and prepared his pillow and took a seat in meditation. So, the story continues. At that time, Venerable Subhuti was amidst the great congregation. He then rose from his seat, adjusted his robes to one shoulder, and with his right knee touched the ground. With palms joined in reverence, he addressed the Buddha. Extraordinary, world-honored one, is the Tathagata's skillful mindfulness of the Bodhisattvas and his skillful entrustment to the Bodhisattvas. World-honored one, in what should good sons and good daughters initiating the Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi dwell? How should they regulate their thoughts? The Buddha replied, Excellent, Subhuti, as you have said, the Tathagata is skillfully mindful of the Bodhisattvas and skillful in entrusting to the Bodhisattvas. If you now listen closely, I shall explain for you in what good sons and good daughters launching Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi mind should thus abide, and how thus they should regulate their thoughts. Yes, world-honored one, gladly I shall listen. So, to unpack the next unfolding for us. The congregation is gathered, and the Buddha takes his seat, and at that we encounter the teacher who's practicing, which is really important. The teacher in Buddhism is not someone who's above practice in like any way. There's just simply no sense in which the teacher is someone who's done practicing now and can just fill you in as a student as to what you should be doing. There is no graduating from this particular class. There's no end to practice. Practice is ceaseless. And so when we encounter the Buddha, one thing that's incredibly significant in the sutra is that once he's taken care of the necessities of life, he sets about formal practice. And he's joined by his students. And what are the students doing? The students are practicing too. It's the same. In a very real way, it's the same. A very wise person once said, the teacher's job is to practice, and the student's job is to practice with the teacher. That's how it works. We practice together as a sangha, as a community. Be very, very leery of any of these number of folks who will purport to have had a dream or an experience, and suddenly they're enlightened and they can tell you all about what you need to do. It just doesn't work like that. At least it doesn't work like that in the Dharma that we practice together. This is very much something that is, it's way more intimate than that. And this takes time. You can't rush through raising your child and expect a good result. It's simply not like that. You can't rush your garden to grow. you have to listen to the garden. The garden will tell you. You are the steward. You are the caretaker. But the tomato blooms of its own time. If you're wise, if you try to get in there and do a bunch of artificial things to make this thing happen before it's really time, actually it's not so good. For sure it's not good for human beings. Now, a lot of times we would really prefer the quick hit of steroids. We would rather just, can't I just quick? And the answer is no. Actually, you can't. This is a one breath at a time, long game. Long-term game. Whole life game. The relationship to the teacher is a whole life thing. It's actually completely not like the university, where students come and they take the classes and they get the information and then they move on. I mean, it can be like that, but it's a whole life thing. The Buddha's disciples were his disciples, and that's that. And they traveled and did what they did, but they would come back together and practice together. And it's very much this way in the Dharma. So no graduation, and no one's beyond the practice, not in the least. And so as the Buddha takes his own seat of practice and is joined by the community of practice, Venerable Subhuti was amidst the great congregation. So here's a particular character, Subhuti, that was one of the disciples of the Buddha who was there at the time. Now, Subhuti then rose from his seat, adjusted his robes, and put one knee to the ground. So, what's up with that? Well, you don't just sort of randomly go up to the teacher and start hammering away at questions. I mean, you can, but there's a formal sense of comportment and timing and place that's part of the setup. They're not two monks walking into a bar, although that can happen, right? Hanging out and say, hey man, this and that, that's fine. Or at a jazz concert or at a potluck party or something, it's okay. But this disciple is demonstrating for us the formal way of actually encountering the teacher. This is not an incidental matter in the life of this person. It's not a hey man kind of thing. They might actually be like that in another moment. That could be. They could be off sweeping the garden and have that hey man kind of relationship. That's possible. But they definitely have this relationship where the robes are adjusted in a particular way and the body is placed in a way of respect, and there's the setting and the context for this encounter to happen. This is really important, and it's very difficult for Western folks to get this, because to us a lot of times this just seems like worship or subservience or any of the possible negative ways that it could actually be. I've never once worshipped any of my teachers, but I bowed to them like countlessly in gratitude and respect and honoring the situation that we're in. But it's not a worshipful thing, and it's definitely not a subservient thing. But for us in the West, that's pretty much the only thing we have to relate this to. It's either a slave-master kind of a weird thing, or it's worshipping of an idol. And it's neither of those. It's simply knowing how to meet the moment, to be able to understand how to actually show up with that mind. The mind of sincerity and the mind of crispness. Subhuti is no slough here. Subhuti is upright. present, very respectful, and also he's putting himself out there. This is a beautiful teaching, just that much. It's a beautiful teaching. How to relate to encountering the Dharma. Many times people will come into Zen feeling very much like they already know everything, with a lot of, well thought through ideas about what the Dharma actually must be. And they don't know how to do what Subhuti here is actually doing. So it's an incredible necessity for practice. For whatever reason, that feeling, that sense, that emotion, that way of being present and taking myself and my teacher and the situation seriously has been there for me. And I don't know why. I think I'm just lucky, or I don't know what. But somehow I've understood, well, right before anybody ever taught me anything about how to move around the Zendo, how to be in correct relationship to the situation. Now it can be overdone. I mean, you can get so formal that you can't breathe in front of the teacher, and that's crazy. So that doesn't work either. There needs to be a nice, healthy blend of things. But usually that's not the problem. Usually the problem is a chronic casualness that has no ballast to it. And here we encounter a great example. So, he touched his knee to the ground, and with palms joined together, he addressed the Buddha. Extraordinary, world-honored one, is the Tathagata's skillful mindfulness of the Bodhisattvas, and his skillful entrustment to the Bodhisattvas. So, what's that? This is Subhuti making a statement. He's saying, it's absolutely astonishing. It's absolutely extraordinary. The Tathagata's skillful mindfulness. And the Tathagata, the world-honored one, is a term for Buddha, and also the Tathagata is a term for Buddha. So they're kind of synonymous terms, although they do have a little bit of a shading to them, as I mentioned in the last talk about this. Tathagata means thusness. So it at once means it's a way of referring to the Buddha, but it's also a way of referring to the suchness of existence. So it's always good to keep those in mind. World-honored one refers to Shakyamuni Buddha, specifically. So extraordinary, astonishing, it's amazing, world-honored one, is the Tathagata's skillful mindfulness of the Bodhisattvas. Subhuti here is appreciating the fact that the Buddha is aware of the students, is actually aware of the Bodhisattvas, is mindful of them, is the way our author has translated it, has them in his heart, has the community in their heart. It's extraordinary how you hold the community. It's something like what Subhuti is saying. And not only just that, not only just aware of the Bodhisattvas, and his skillful entrustment to the Bodhisattvas. So not only are you aware of the community, but you entrust the community. It's absolutely astonishing. What is this entrustment that Subhuti is talking about? In what way is the Buddha entrusting to the community? It's a very important point. It's not just a matter of the Buddha is aware and mindful and heartful and present to the community, but he entrusts the community. This is really astonishing. And that's what Subhuti is bringing out. Now they have this sort of speaking in the third person thing, which is a little royal sounding, But that's what that is, and we have to just kind of unpack that. Extraordinary, world-honored one, is the Tathagata's skillful mindfulness of the bodhisattvas and his skillful entrustment to the bodhisattvas. What is entrusted? What does it mean? It's a beautiful question, and one that the sutra goes on to work with. World-honored one, now comes the question. In what way should good sons and daughters initiating Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi dwell? How should they regulate their thoughts? To unpack this. So again, the world-honored one, right? This good sons and daughters thing is talking about the community. It's talking about the people who have found their way into the Sangha. It's kind of an interesting footnote that according to some scholars, the Buddhist Sangha is the proto-democracy. India at that time, and today perhaps still, is a very caste-driven kind of a place, or at least a caste-aware place. But at that time, big-time caste, right? So that has everything to do with a worldview of reincarnation and karma and the social structure built around this. And so the pariah do not associate with the warrior or the priest class and the merchants and so on. And in the Sangha there is no class. There is no caste. Everyone who comes into the Sangha is in the Sangha, and that's it. We leave those distinctions outside, and including men and women were able to join the community. Very different. So in what way should the community initiating Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi dwell? Now, initiating Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is full and complete awakening. That's what that means. We chant that together in the Heart Sutra, but what it means is full and complete enlightenment. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. I mean, we could parse every syllable and digest it, but that's what it means. Those members of the Sangha who are set themselves to awaken. And not just awaken for themselves, but awaken on behalf of all beings. This is firmly Mahayana literature now. This is talking about the Bodhisattva Mahayana impulse of attaining full and complete awakening, not simply so that we can escape suffering, but in addition to that, so that we can be of use to others, so that we can actually show up and function on behalf of a world that desperately needs us. So how should, asks Subhuti, those of us who are in this thing, who are driven to practice on behalf of all beings, how should we dwell? How should they regulate their thoughts? Some translations say, how should we wield our minds? At least that's how I would translate it. How are we to practice? What is the way for us to hold our minds, to hold our lives? How do we do this? It's a fantastic question. And it's coming at the right time, in the right place, for the right reasons. Notice, Subhuti is not saying, "Oh Buddha, what will the stock market close at tomorrow?" Not asking that, or anything like it. Asking not only for himself, but also on behalf of all the community that's gathered. How do we do this? Now, it would seem at the face of it that this is a completely obvious thing. There's the teacher, there's the Buddha, and then there's the students, and the students ask the question, can we get to the real thing somewhere? That is the real thing. In a sense, if the rest of the sutra was lost, we still have the main part. be there. Practice. Understand, study intimately and deeply how to be there, how to show up. And ask. If you don't ask, it's not going to happen. And to be fair, it takes us some time to figure out how to even ask anything. I don't even know what to ask or what to do. It's just my heart is opening. My body is full and empty and my mind is crazy and I want to be here, and what do I even do to do this? And that's perfect. That's ideal. And then here, on behalf of all those folks, Subhuti stands up and takes the position in front of everybody and asks the question, God Almighty, how do we do this? Here we are. Now, at this point, everybody in the story is fully invested, okay? These folks have cut the hair and shaved the beard, and they've let go of their worldly whatever they had, and they're all in. This is their full-time life. So you might think that they should already kind of know, right? Wouldn't they kind of have figured that out beforehand? Not really. It's one of the very interesting things to me as our community continues to grow, the viewing of the Raksu as being the statement of, now we know everything, and it's like completely not like that. And I'm happy. I'm so happy that as time goes on, it becomes more and more obvious that that's true. This means my heart is in this enough that I'm getting ready to actually be able to confront how to ask, to actually start engaging this thing. At that time, Venerable Subhuti was amidst the great congregation. He then rose from his seat, adjusted his robes to one shoulder, and with his right knee touched the ground, which, as you see, at the services when I have the big case on, it's on one shoulder. It's not a cape. Although that might be fun. And with his right knee touched the ground. With palms joined in reverence, he addressed to the Buddha, "Extraordinary, world-honored one, is the Tathagatha's skillful mindfulness of the Bodhisattvas and his skillful entrustment to them. And yet I have a question. Even with your astonishing mindfulness and awesome entrustment, I have a question." And at this, I bet you a lot of people in the community said, "Oh boy, I hope it's a good one." And there's a silence. And then he says, "World-honored one, in what way should good sons and daughters initiating Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi dwell? Us here now, who are all in, how do we dwell? How do we live? How do we die?" Notice, it's not, what's the mystery of the cosmos that gets me able to manipulate things at my will? It's nothing like that. How do I live? How do we dwell as a community together? How should we regulate our minds? How shall we work with our hearts? How shall we work with our bodies? Please teach. Please help. So consider this. Consider the question. Consider yourself. And we'll take it up next time.